I respect this man. His dramas lend extreme depth and layers of plot and character. He understands the human psyche, behavior, and divinity. So authentic, his scripts ripped out of life's pages and blown up on screen through a camera to replace synthesis and beginnings of all human emotion. I hope one day to meet this amazing modern Shakespeare. I love this man. He inspires me and confirms the genius within us awaiting the right time to awaken. God bless you, Tyler Perry.
Hey, how y'all doing?
Welcome back to my channel. I know it's been a while, almost like half a year since I was on here. Almost like a year since I was on here. And if you guys are wondering like where I've been, um, I don't know. When I find out, I'll be sure to let you guys know. I'm just lazy. I procrastinate on my procrastination. I don't know what to tell you guys. Anyways, the idea for this video came up when me and my friend was, of course, talking shit. Which, oddly enough, is how a lot of ideas for these videos pop up. This all started when my friend told me to watch A Jasmine's Blues, which was released recently, but not that recently. Okay, it's been a while since I was supposed to record this video. The movie itself was met with moderate success between like audience and critics alike. And after watching it, I can say that it wasn't a bad movie. Okay, it wasn't a good movie, but like it wasn't as bad as Tyler Perry movies can get, if you know what I'm talking about. It was still plagued with all the typical Tyler Perry-esque issues. The acting was stiff at times, the story was rather predictable, the music was awful, especially for a movie titled A Jasmine's Blue. You would think like the music would be top tier, but no. Like, why did the main character sound like this?
Makes no difference if it's sweet or hot. Just give that rhythm everything you've got. Yeah.
Unacceptable. But surprisingly, I could say that this is one of Tyler Perry's best looking films. Honestly, it feels like it was just an excuse to use that 1930s Southern black aesthetic. And I mean, it was used well. So at this point, you're probably wondering, why am I making a whole 30-minute, 2 hour long video about a movie that really wasn't all that memorable? I just really feel like this movie was just indicative of a much larger problem I have with Tyler Perry. I feel as if for years now, at least with the younger generation, there has been like this general consensus that Tyler Perry movies are ass. They're so bad that every couple of months he would be trending on Twitter for like his horrible movies. Like, you just had to be there when A Fall from Grace dropped. Like, it's things like that that just makes me wish I was still on Twitter. It's just like we have firmly placed all of Tyler Perry's shows, works, whatever, into black people movies category. And by black people movies, I don't just mean movies featuring black people. It They have a distinctive feel to them. I'm talking about media that maintains the same feel and structure of a typical piece of work written by and manufactured for black people. And that's really just my long-winded way of saying it's pretty stereotypical. Like, take anything from BT or even Tubi recently. Like, they're all great examples of this oversaturation of these typical black stories that just not enough time, care, love, and devotion was put into. And I think the person we have to blame for not all of it, but for a large part of it, is Tyler Perry himself. You could almost say he's like the godfather of this shit. Tyler Perry, or rather Medea, has been a staple in black community for years now. All you have to do is just utter a holler, and the image of a black man in a immaculate gray wig, not gonna lie, that should be laid, pops up in your head. It's like Tyler Perry films are almost the blueprint for black-led films, especially of the early 2000s. His works all have this distinctive feel that is replicated way too often in black media. And I mean, in some cases, this can be a good thing, you know, like when an artist's work is so distinctive that they have successfully created a niche for themselves and can even be considered an auteur in some spaces. An auteur just meaning a filmmaker whose personal influence and artistic control over a movie are so great that the filmmaker is regarded as the author of the movie rather than just simply the director. And when it comes to Tyler Perry, I would agree somewhat. this would be a great way to describe Tyler Perry, if not for the fact that everything that made a Tyler Perry movie feel like a Tyler Perry movie was also what made it a bad movie. Now, most children have grown up at least watching one or two Tyler Perry movies, and I'll be the first to admit I enjoyed them back then. But one thing I can give Tyler Perry's earlier works is that it actually felt like a movie. They had quality, and you can obviously see that a lot of care was put into them, especially on the production side. So, what the fuck happened? Personally, my belief is in that Tyler Perry has gotten lazy, and not in the sense of working, because we'll touch on that later. But I think he got lazy with the quality of his works. Because before his acquisition of Tyler Perry Studio, most of Tyler Perry's movies were made in junction with Lionsgate Studio. These movies felt like real movies. I don't know if it was because, the people at Lionsgate was like, we have to meet a certain standard, or if he had an actual crew, or if now it's just him, which honestly I wouldn't even disbelieve if it's just him. But it's like once he got his own studio, it's like the quality went down drastically. Like honestly, I wouldn't even be surprised if he never leaves Tyler Perry Studios when making his movies. And that's why all of his recent movies feel oddly contained and small and sometimes downright familiar. Like I know it probably takes time and money to film on location, but it really does make all the difference. I think there's just no better way to explain his works now than cheap. All right, let's get the big one out of the way first. Tyler Perry films just look cheap. Like, typically, there is no cinematography to think of. All the shots feel generic, boring, predictable, as if he's just simply trying to get us to the next scene without trying to say anything. And I feel like the least you can do with the movie is make that shit look nice. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like we've all enjoyed shows or tolerated, I would say, tolerated shows and movies simply because of what they looked like. But when I'm watching these movies, it feels less like a movie and more like a sitcom, which makes sense when you think about where Tyler Perry has started from. The man started off making plays, and it is so apparent to this day. As I was watching A Jasmine's Blue, I couldn't help but feeling like this should have been on stage. And although similar, theater and film function very differently. And this is probably where the overacting of his characters come from as well. In plays, the actors have to amp up performances so everyone in the audience can feel what they are supposed to be feeling in a given scene. There is no camera zoom in on a slight lip quiver or a character's tears. You can't really be subtle in theater. Typically, you are on a small stage with hundreds of people just trying to get a glimpse of you. It doesn't really work. When on stage, you have to convey emotions in a more dramatic way for, the niggas in the back of the audience to see and feel what's going on. But like with film, you don't really have to do that. You can dial those performances back because we have a camera that can linger on those minute, emotions. It's the whole concept of you don't have to scream. You have a mic. I don't really think Tyler Perry gets this. Like one problem I have with his characters are that he likes to have these cartoonishly villainous people in all his movies. Like there's always has to be like one person that is just straight downright devious. And I feel like a great example of that, just for me personally, is Mike from Why Did I Get Married? And this is one of his better works. I think what actually made the whole movie entertaining, at least for me, was just like how outlandish this man was. I don't know if Tyler wanted me to take them seriously, but I wasn't. Like, let's just take a second here out of our scheduled program to list this nigga's crimes. He constantly puts down and emotionally abuses his wife because she's fat. He invites his side chick on a couple's resort because he doesn't care about his wife because she's fat. He gets on a plane with said side chick and leaves his wife to drive up a snowy mountains alone all by herself because she's fat. Constantly cheats on and disrespects his wife throughout the whole trip in front of all their friends, and now say it with me, because she's fat. Leaves his fat wife for the skinny side chick and had the nerves to come back in the end when she finally took off the fat suit and lost a little bit of weight and got herself a good sexy God-fearing black man, asking if she could take him back. Like honestly, I feel like that was the worst thing he did throughout the movie. Like true textbook villain. Sometimes it's so unbelievable to me. It feels like this really could be a Darman video. Like, tell me you can't see this shit now. Husband cheats on the wife because of her weight and lives to regret it. Like, all of his movies have these outlandishly villainous people in them. And it just oftentimes comes off more funny than serious to me. And honestly, that really is a much larger problem with his works, is because oftentimes he is depicting heinous shit, things that actually happen to people, unfortunate things that happen to people, but the packaging of it just feels so poorly done that it becomes humorous, and it often feels like we're making light of these serious situations. Tyler Perry has casted some great black all-stars, Idris Elba's, Taraji P. Henson's, Angela Bassett, all wonderful actors. So I don't really think it's a talent problem. I read somewhere that there are no bad actors, only bad directors. And I think that quote fully applies here with Tyler Perry. Like, it's Tyler's job to get the correct performance out of these people. That's what it means to direct. You point them where they should be going. And if they are not making it to their destination, you gave them wrong directions. And I really feel like Tyler is telling these people to overact, because to him, that's probably what makes a good performance. Like, if it's always worked for his plays, it should work for his films as well. And just besides the bad acting, I do feel like everything else also feels cheap. Just feels like not enough time, care, and money was put into it. Like, the lighting is god awful. Why the fuck everything be so dark? Like, some of these shots, TP, I really feel like I could make myself with a ring light and an iPhone. Production is even worse at times. We're seeing speakers, microphones, cast lunch, shit that was obviously left in by mistake. Like, seriously, what are we doing here? And don't get me started on the wigs. They all look bad, except Medea's. As stated before, her shit be laid. TP, make sure that shit is coming out the scalp. But just about every other wig looks so bad, it's actually hilarious. But like, what really gets me with the bad wigs is half the time it is so very unnecessary. Like, why the fuck did Tyler Perry put this thick ass braid lace on Shamar Moore? Like, is Tyler Perry ashamed of bald headed men? Like, did Shamar Moore's bald head not fit into his evil bald headed man propaganda? Like, what's going on? Like, this shit is unacceptable. And you damn well know that, TP. You know that shit. Like, there are too many talented hairstylists on Instagram melting laces into people's scalps for you to have a whole team, and we get this. Like, on the real though, look at this man's head. It's like he had two bad wigs on. It's like Tyler Perry put the first wig on and was like, oh no, it's too close to bald, and threw another one on that bitch. He really is playing in our faces at this point with this cheap ass production quality. Then, when people was rightfully getting on his ass about the bad wigs, his response was basically, I hire people to do that for me. And is it just me, or does this not make any sense still? It's still your responsibility to make sure you are hiring people that know how to do hair. Like, this response is so fucking lackluster to me. It just gives off the vibes that I don't really care about what's going on over there as long as what I'm doing is taken care of. But what he doesn't understand is, nigga, you're taking care of the whole thing, the whole production, the whole show, all of that. You're the director and creator. Then his next statement just made things make sense. Sometimes things slip because he moves a little too fast, so he's identified the problem, but continues on because he doesn't care. He's literally saying he's not spending the time on these things to allow them to fully develop. Like, to me, that just came off as, don't blame me for the wigs, that's my team's fault. But like, you hired the team, and you're rushing them. Like, the blame falls right back on you, TP. But unfortunately, that alone isn't Tyler Perry's issue. Oh no, it's much more than this. His stories are rather formulaic, filled with storylines that I like to call cheap drama. But cheap drama is just dramatic situations that are very easy to elicit a response out of the viewer. Things like a backstabbing best friend, a cheating spouse, an undercover gay man. Oh, Tyler Perry loves him a good undercover gay man plotline.
Oh, so you doing the bending?
Those just very soap opera esque plot lines, you know? Like honestly, Tyler Perry would be so good at making Lifetime movies. But yes, like most of these movies are filled with the same tired, tired, tired plot lines. Now, I'm not saying I am completely above cheap drama. Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon are basically medieval soap operas, and I live for that shit. Highly dramatized works are fun, but it all matters in the execution. And like stated before, Tyler Perry execution is just so poor that it really just drains any type of real enjoyment you can get out of the movie, or especially his recent works. Like, what is going on, Tyler Perry? I need to know what's going on at Tyler Perry Studio. Like, I need to be there to see exactly how these shows and movies are being filmed. Alright, sorry, I didn't know where to put this in at, but I need you guys to feel the pain that I went through while watching these Tyler Perry movies for this video. I literally couldn't even get through the last one, which was Homecoming, because it was so bad. Like, literally, as I was watching it, I was like, this is making me uncomfortable. It's not even funny.
Joe, I wish I was a mirror so I could see myself inside of you.
Is he serious? I wish you'd stop that.
Joe, huh? That's your grandniece.
It has literally been 20 years, TP. 20 years, and you're still telling the same weird ass incest jokes? That wasn't even funny the first time, and damn sure isn't even funny now. Like, literally, I had to stop the movie after this. Now, a common criticism that gets thrown Tyler Perry's way is that his movies depict black people in negative stereotypes, specifically black women. And I can't say I fully disagree with that comment. His films oftentimes highlight the worst parts of black community. His over reliance on making caricatures out of black women and playing it off as a joke is questionable. Sometimes it feels like Tyler Perry actively dislikes black people, and no one can tell me otherwise. Now, don't get me wrong, I never want to stifle the voice and story of a black person just because it depicts black people in negative light. And I know sometimes some heinous shit happens, and sometimes black people do fucked up things, and get fucked up things happen to them all the time. And I never want to silence those stories, but there is a very real difference, to me at least, between what Tyler Perry is doing when he is making these movies and when someone who genuinely just wants to tell their story is making these movies. A reality that often gets overlooked when it comes to black people that make content based upon their experiences is that at the end of the day, they are selling black. They are selling black culture, they are selling the black experience, they're selling black. And this isn't necessarily a bad thing. Some of my favorite things in the world are products of this. However, to sell black successfully in my book only requires one thing, and that is love. I need to be able to feel the love for whatever you are selling, or at the very least, appreciation for it. And Tyler Perry's recent movies just doesn't have that anymore. It feels like he's just thinking, what's going to shock the audience next? What can I do to this black woman to evoke a reaction? What's something a stereotypical black woman would say here? Like, it's just not genuine. Now let's take an example of a show that does sell black correctly to me. Atlanta. Now, even though I've had my gripes with the last 2 seasons, and Donald Glover is no saint in my book, especially when it comes to black women, I cannot deny the palpable love for ATL I feel whenever I watched an episode of those first 2 seasons. Every character interaction, every location, even the jokes, they all felt like a real depiction of what life is like for those growing up in impoverished Atlanta. In both Tyler Perry Productions and Atlanta, there are some shitty things being depicted. But in Atlanta, the love for these stories, and much more importantly, the people, is very much there. It's like, yeah, this place is flawed, but I love it. I don't feel like I'm watching black people struggle because it makes for good stories. I'm watching black people struggle because sometimes that's what happens. And I feel like Tyler Perry movies and Atlanta both kind of share the same, supposed to share the same outlook. Like, there is humor to the absurdity of these situations that a lot of black people face. But just in Tyler Perry case, it falls flat when it feels like you actively dislike the characters that you are portraying in your movie. Like, the love is what stops a movie from simply being about Black people to being made for them. It feels as if Tyler Perry has lost that love a long time ago. That he really just sees these movies as a way into the upper echelon of Hollywood now. Just a never ending stream of money and admiration from Black people. Like, when I see him sitting at the Oscars but never winning one, it doesn't inspire hope like a lot of older Black people would tell you it should. When I see him producing shitty ass movies for white directors, buying his way into connections with the royals, I can't help but feel this is what he always wanted. That somewhere along the way, it stopped being about portraying these Black people stories and really just started to be a means to an end for him. Like I said, it probably didn't fully start out this way, but it damn sure feels like it now. Because Tyler Perry has always claimed that he has drew off an inspiration from the Black woman in his life. Like, the character of Medea is an amalgamation of his mother and his aunties. But even if all of that is true, all of these stories just feel like they are the same things over and over again after a certain point. Like, that was a good explanation for the first couple of movies. But, after a while, don't you get tired of producing the same cheap drama? Like, aren't you tired? Especially after you made this whole empire off the backs of those, let's face it, struggle stories. Stories where main characters are poor and unhappy, where sexual abuse runs rampant. Like, Tyler Perry now has the ability to highlight different types of stories, but yet he doesn't. And I think what frustrates me the most about A Jasmine's Blue is it was obviously Tyler Perry's attempt at creating a real movie. He obviously put a bit more work into the cinematography of it and even was going as far to heavily promote it. Yet the movie still fell short in its depiction of Black people. So it just felt to me that even when he was trying his best to create an Oscar worthy movie, he still could not get away from the same plot lines, from that same struggle love, from the same Black people being in turmoil. So in 1968, the sitcom Julia aired. It was largely hailed today as the first television show to feature a Black woman that was not cast in your stereotypical role. Julia Baker, our main character, also played by the great, beautiful, and elusive Diane Carroll, is a single widow raising her young son. She works as a nurse in a plant and is friends with just about everyone in her nice apartment building. And although being a situational comedy, almost none of her issues arise from money troubles. Now I promise you I'm going somewhere with this. Now, despite this being a pretty simple premise, it was met with tons of controversy. Critics often claimed that this wasn't the typical reality for many Black Americans, with at least 1/3 of Black people at the time being poverty stricken. This was just simply too unrealistic for them. And we know what that means. And on many occasions, Miss Carroll herself defended the show, saying it was simply a fantasy, and that very few shows actually showed life as it really was. And with all due respect to Miss Carroll, I understand where she was getting at with these type of comments. But a part of me read this and couldn't help but feel, was it really a fantasy? Was it really so far-fetched of an idea that a Black woman can be widowed, living alone with her son, and not struggling financially? And then what made me even more upset is thinking, all these years later, has anything really changed? Why do I feel like I'm still asking the same question when it comes to Black media? Is it really such a fantasy to show Black people living normal lives? Honestly, it really feels like there's only 3 types of shows on air about Black people. You got the highly dramatized crime dramas, the Powers, the Snowfalls. You got the cheap dramas, which Tyler Perry has fully monopolized. And then you got the straight up slave shit. The ones where we are either literally slaves or might as well still be them. And don't get me wrong, I understand that there is a reluctance in Hollywood to invest in Black stories. That for some reason there is still this belief that our stories will not make any money. But we are also aiding in this problem when we have people like TP who have the money and power to tell different stories, but simply doesn't. Like, don't you want more for Black people? Don't you want our work to be associated with higher production quality? Like, we deserve more than bad wigs. Like, we deserve more than drug addict mothers and absent fathers. We deserve more than being slaves. I don't want these stories not to be told at all. The fact that so many of them are popular means they do resonate with audiences. And unfortunately, the reality of a lot of Black people is they can relate to this. I never want to silence the struggles of Black people. But if all you see is Black people struggling, then you believe that's all Black people have. That's why a single Black mother not having any financial issues is a fantasy to people. And I don't blame Tyler Perry for all of this. But like I said before, he was, and in many cases still is, the blueprint for a lot of Black media, especially comedies. We had a whole wave of Black men dressing up as stereotypical Black women and profiting big time off of it. To this very day, we still see it. And it is really insidious when you consider the fact that it is those same very women Tyler Perry is making fun of that continue to keep him and his career afloat. Like, the chokehold Tyler Perry has on the older Black generation of women needs to be studied. Like, they're not giving that man up. And which I also find interesting is a lot of those older Black church folks are, let's face it, homophobic, but yet they love this man in drag. I'll never forget, somebody on Twitter said that the spirit of Medea be calling that man. But all I'm saying is Tyler Perry has amassed too much power to continue to let these be the only types of stories about Black people being told. And I'm not saying there isn't an audience for these works, but I feel like it's not as big as Tyler Perry thinks it is. Believe it or not, I don't want Tyler Perry to stop making his low budget shitty movies. I feel like we can cut it down from like 10 of these productions a year to like 2. And I'm really pushing it with the 2, to be honest. The rest could go to so many other Black creatives. And like, a common defense of TP that I often hear is that he made it. That he's a successful Black man who built this long lasting career from those so called mediocre movies. And to some people, especially Black people, that is enough. But it's not for me, if I'm being honest. Yeah, I will never take away Tyler Perry's accomplishments as a Black man in Hollywood. It is no easy feat to get this far, but you alone making it is not enough. But I will give credit when credit is due. I do love seeing an all Black cast, even if he's casting the same handful of Black actors, but we're not going to talk about them. Those are still Black people being employed, just on the surface level though. Like, what does it matter to see Black faces on screen if they aren't behind it as well? That's why when I seen this video by him, I was appalled.
I don't know if you know this, but all shows on television have a writer's room. And most of the time there are 10 people, 12, whatever, that write all these television shows, right? Well, I have no writer's room. Nobody writes any of my work. I write it all. Why am I telling you this? I wrote all of these scripts by myself in 2019. What's my point? Work ethic!
Like, this shouldn't be something he's proud of. Like, what's the point of having all these acres of land if it's only you on it? There are only so much stories that can be pulled out of one person. And I'm not saying that it's totally impossible. I'm sure that there are very talented people out there that can make multiple high quality works within a year even. But Tyler Perry is not one of those people. And just to know that he's bragging about being the only writer, being the one to do all of this on his own. And it's like, yes, nigga, we know. We can tell. But my question is, why? Like, he obviously has the money to hire other people. Like, he's over here buying his way into being the godfather of Meghan and Harry's child, but you can't hire any writers. Like, come on, bro. Like, he obviously has the money. Get some more writers in there. And I feel like, especially now that we are a couple months into a writer strike, it is the perfect time to bring up this video.
Give y'all the tea. Okay, so contrary to where Tyler is now, when he was doing sitcoms on TBS, House of Pain and Meet the Browns had a writer's room. And after 100 episodes, they were going into syndication and the writers wanted better wages, and they also were considering unionizing. Tyler fired 4 of the writers under the guise of, they weren't giving me what I wanted. Furthermore, he claimed he could not afford to pay the rates these writers were requesting, and I want y'all to keep in mind at this point, Tyler Perry is a billionaire and he still has no writer's room. This led to a boycotting of Tyler Perry Studios, and one of the former writers, Christopher Morris, said it's very disheartening considering that this is a studio run by African Americans. What Tyler Perry is essentially saying to us is that you're black and there's not a lot of opportunities for you, so you will take what I will give you, whether it's fair or not. Another writer who was fired, Terry Brown, stated, I feel like we were slapped in the face. She said, we were good enough to create 100 episodes, but now when it comes to reaping the benefits of the show being syndicated and having other spin-offs from it, he decides to let us go unless we accept a horrible offer. Now, Tyler Perry was asked about this situation on radio, and he explained that his audience only wants his voice. Get into it.
I did have a writer's room about 10 years ago. I had the writer's room, and they were turning in scripts that weren't up to par for my audience. I've been working with this audience and cultivating for 25 years, so I know what they want. So I would have to pay them to write the scripts. When they turn in a bad scripts, I got to pay them to rewrite the scripts. And then I would go and rewrite the script, and then they go to WGA, and they grieve me and say he rewrote the script and pay me again. So it was just such an ugly situation, so I just decided, you know what, I'm just going to write because I know that my audience knows my voice. And I'm speaking directly to them. So
I'm sorry, y'all, but that just gave, I don't want to pay my talent behind the camera, and my audience is okay with mediocrity, so why should I pay for more? In addition to that, Tyler Perry has been on the do not work list for the Actors Equity Association for years. I mean, you can pause and get into it.
Like, honestly, this is just so unacceptable. Like, it's so obvious that he does not care about the work that he is actually making, to the point where he doesn't even care about the people that are actually creating the work alongside with him. Like, get a real makeup crew, Tyler Perry. Get a real writer's room. This is the opportunity to give back to the Black community that gave so much to you. But yet it just seems like he wants all the praise and glory to himself. And to make things worse, for the most part it appears that Tyler cannot take criticism. When the Boondocks aired their parody episode of him, he allegedly called Turner Studios to get it banned, and up until recently it was. Now I admit it was a scathing depiction of him, but there were still value criticisms to take away from it. His formulaic plot lines, his obsessions with heroic light-skinned men and villainous dark-skinned ones, how a lot of rich people take advantage of Black people's love of the church for their own manipulative gain. Those were all valuable critiques that could have been at least acknowledged privately, if not publicly, but he allegedly lashed out in anger instead. And fine, even if you were to say that this was a one-time thing and that the Boondocks were just rude, he did the same thing again basically with Atlanta, and this time it was a much tamer critique if you ask me. But allegedly he was upset and won't text Donald Glover back. It's like his reluctance to accept faults shows even with how he responded to the comments about the bad wigs, just blaming everyone else but himself. Like, he has made millions basically making fun of Black people. It just seems hypocritical of him to get upset when the roles are reversed. When he cannot openly accept criticism or gets openly upset about these things, it makes it seem like he thinks the only reaction Black people should have to his work is one of gratitude and positivity. Now, I don't know the man personally, but to me, what I'm seeing is a very proud man. Like, there is nothing wrong with getting help, especially when you are producing so much like that. Like, I don't think you guys understand how crazy that is, to be producing and making that much content in that short amount of time. There's no way all of that is good. I don't care who the fuck you are. There's no way all of that is quality work. You cannot spread yourself that thin. Like, not only is he a workaholic and promoting it, but the work isn't even good. Like, you're wasting your money and our time. It really just gives off the vibes that he is unable to relinquish any credit. Like, we get it, Tyler Perry. You're a self-made man. No one is taking that from you. But it's time to give something up. Let them writers back into the room. Give other Black creatives the chance to have their stories be told. Be the change you so desperately needed when you were coming up in the industry. Instead, we get this. But really, at the end of the day, my question to Tyler Perry is, don't you want more for Black people? I understand the barrier of racism that looms over all Black creatives. I know sometimes that Black media feels like Black media because that's all Hollywood will permit them to make. I even know that a lot of black people movies feel cheap because they really are cheap. They're not getting the funding that they need to accurately portray their vision. I understand all of that, but that is not the case for Tyler Perry.
Sayonara, bye bye. Please take care of yourself.
You know what that video of Tyler Perry was really giving? Like, you know, when a child comes home from school and they show you what they made in class, and it really is just chicken scratch, like some lines on a piece of paper, and you can be like, oh my gosh, it's so beautiful, or I love it, but secretly throw it away when they're not looking. Like, that's what it was definitely giving.